One of the experts hired by former President Donald Trump to investigate and find voter fraud in the 2020 election has some bad news. Ken Block, the software engineer who was tasked by the Trump campaign with finding the fraud in the 2020 election, recently told CNN that every single instance of voter fraud that he was asked to investigate ended up being false. Here he is.
In my job looking for voter fraud for the campaign, we didn't find enough fraud to have impacted the result of any election in any of the swing states that we took a look at. But much more importantly, the campaign asked me to look at claims of fraud that other people were making, and these claims were coming in fast and furious in the 30 days after the election. My team looked at approximately 15 or so claims, every one of which we were able to prove was false.
Whoopsie. Whoopsie.
Oh no, how does this keep happening? It must be the deep state. Yes, that's it. The Iranians, the Ukrainians, maybe the Pomeranians. They have foiled us again by getting to one of our investigators that we hired. Yes, that must be it. We're not wrong. They're just always one step ahead of us. How does this happen? Come on. How many does this make? How many experts? Well, look, to be fair, in addition to this, there was a Berkeley research group. Okay, these were firms that were hired directly by the Trump campaign, okay, to go out and to find the fraud, right? So this guy headed and founded Simpatico Software Systems, okay, and he had ran for governor. This is Mr. Block in Rhode Island as a Republican, okay. Now in 2001, he founded this Simpatico Software Systems, since he's a computer engineer by trade and worked in technology for decades, so he knows what he's doing, right? And so Republicans, again, they approached him and they said, hey, do you want to investigate these allegations of voter fraud? And he says, well, yeah, of course. I will use my decades of knowledge in computers to go and see whether or not the systems were tampered with or the votes were stolen. Sure, of course, yes, I'll do it. So it makes sense, right? And the firm that he founded has been used by other states and companies to look for evidence of fraud. He's acted as an expert witness in court cases involving fraud. So again, knows what he's looking for, knows what he's talking about. He's not a Democrat operative, he's a Republican. So there's every reason, of course, to believe the things that he says. Except that, of course, we know that the things that he says, when it comes to Trump and his diehards, they're not going to believe it because it's not what they want to hear. Now, to people in reality, what he says matters because it's facts, it's reality. Block said that he was sent fraud claims by Trump's campaign to study, to look into, and that's exactly what he did. And some of them came from campaign staffers. Others originated from sources outside the campaign. Some of them came from informal advisors to Trump. So some of them probably were kind of out there. Look, in the same interview, he then talks about, yeah, some of them were for people that didn't know exactly how this worked and they're kind of out there. Didn't cite any specific examples. But then, he also talked about like, oh yeah, you have math professors bringing this thing that maybe could possibly, have happened, but then you got to get into the math, into the weeds and all that stuff and try to explain to them how, sure, on paper, this is possible, but at the same time, we just didn't find any evidence to prove that this theory is correct. And so, I mean, there it is. There it is. And he's even said, and this was according to the Washington Post, that some of the more, he was brought some pretty ridiculous ones, more ridiculous than others. And again, there were some that were, hey, that could be possible. We might want to look into this. This seems like it could be a little bit of evidence here. It turns out that we, dug into it, we ran the numbers, and it didn't quite work out. Okay. And we just couldn't prove that there was any evidence of fraud here. And so, look, I'm kind of curious about what the more insane claims were, because that's just my area of interest. I like to hear the more crazy theories. And I'm wondering if the crazy theories were the ones that the Trump campaign and its advisors had him chasing after. I wonder if any of them might have possibly involved.
In Venezuela.
You know, it had to have come up. You know it. You know it. After all, they did have Sidney Powell, going out and making those very, very claims. And so, I don't know. But there it is. They looked into it. Once again, no evidence of voter fraud, enough to sway the election. I'm not saying that voter fraud doesn't exist and never has happened. Of course it does. And yes, it has happened. It's just not in significant enough numbers to sway these elections. And, well, I think that makes me feel better, knowing that, of course, our votes are generally safe, secure, and counted. But as something tells me that Trump supporters, they're just not going to believe it.